Sister Therese Mary Foote.
Well, good morning,
Yes,
Jody
yes.
Screes.
You know, I thought of you this past Saturday when Sister Attracta was giving the welcome at the time of our celebration of new leadership.
Yes.
And she talked about resilience. And you came to mind. I mean, you're 90 years old right now.
Right now.
And I suspect that each day is a brand new day.
It is.
And you know what resilience means in your life.
Yes.
Would you please share with our listeners your story when you were 9 years old?
Probably when I was 9 years old, it was probably one of the key features that changed my life completely. Being born in a beautiful, beautiful, loving family, all I've known is love. And during the Depression, when my father lost his job, we had to move into, when I say we, that's my mom and dad, and we 3 kids, and I was the youngest of 3. And we moved in with my aunts and uncles on my mom's side, and from a kind of a Catholic parish and a Catholic family. A lot of the men didn't get married, so of the 9 siblings of my mom, only 3 had married, and the others were maidens and bachelors. And so we lived with them. Mm-hmm. So I lived in a household of a lot of adults when in 1929,
what a gift.
We moved in with them and stayed with them 10 full years in this household. Complete love and compassion, and that's all I knew.
You must have had a favorite that you can talk about now.
Yes. So that was truly a gift. Well, then, when I was 9 years old, I got the set of measles. It was either
like the German measles.
Either the German. I had within a week's just between them, I got the 2 sets of measles. I had the German measles, and I had the 3-day measles, one right upon the other, which left me in kidney failure.
At the age of 9?
At the age of 9. And I was hospitalized for a period of 14 weeks because my body, that normally should have weighed between 60 and 70 pounds, weighed over 105 with fluid. And they did all kinds of treatments to try to eliminate the fluid without much intervention. And finally I was taken to Babies and Children's Hospital in Cleveland, where I was born. And they didn't have anything for that for me. And at the time of my serious part, I had the kidney failure, I had double pneumonia, I had abscessed ear, and at age 9 I had shingles. And I can remember the hoop over my bed because I had them on my stomach, and the hoop so that not even the covers could touch me because of the pain that was there. And so, because I had chickenpox as a child, so I've never heard of a child before having shingles, but I had that.
Well, you know, I've observed your gift of compassion, and surely that stems from that experience. You know what all of those diseases and afflictions are. Was it common, the German measles and measles during your day?
I don't know that because of the 2 of them on top of one another as viral infections, I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I do know that the particular disease that I was diagnosed with it, which was a combination of factors, almost everybody else died. The others. And that hospital had only 7 cases in the history of that clinic at the time I was there, and I was the only one.
Wow. To what do you owe your cure?
Totally to the grace of God and to the intervention of God, because that's where the Carmelites came into being, so that Therese and the Carmelites are very, very special and sacred to me. And my parents were led to the Carmelite monastery in Cleveland, which is still there, and went there for prayer. intervention.
And you have proof of that today, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Would you
And
mind showing
one
us?
One of the irony, one of the things about it, we had a young doctor who was, I remarkably got better and was cured after that 14 weeks. And I remember it was around Thanksgiving time when I came home from the hospital. And there was a young doctor several years later, because in the meantime we had moved to Detroit, and it was a long story. But this young doctor was studying this disease. And when I was in high school, my mother got a letter from this doctor. He was studying this, and he said, I hate to write to you, Mrs. Foote, I'm not sure if Dorothy is still alive, but if she is, she's getting the point of marriageable age, and with only one kidney, I would suspect that there might be difficulties there. Could I ever get a chance to see her?
Oh my.
So my mother took me to Cleveland, because we were living in Detroit at that time, took me to Cleveland, and it was that examination from that doctor, and I had 2 perfectly good kidneys.
My heaven. Oh
And
my.
the doctor gave me a very fine bill of health. And it was that examination that I used as my entrance to Adrian.
Oh my.
And prior to that time, I had planned on becoming a Carmelite because I had been devoted to St. Therese. I took her for my confirmation name. And obviously I took her as my religious name, which prompted me to retain it at the time that we changed our names because Therese had meant so much to me.
So when you came to Detroit from Cleveland, I presume it's for your father's work.
Yes, that's right.
And you went to school where?
At St. Ambrose. And that was my first encounter with the Adrian Dominicans. And I had the Ursulines in Cleveland for my first 6 years. And my 7th year, I had Margaret Joanne, and I had Margreta, and Maura, and Noreen, and Sister Mary Basil, and Sister Innocencia, and Sister Marie Josephine. All of these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful women. And I fell in love with the Adrian Dominicans because of their happiness, their joy, their spontaneity, and their love for one another.
And they were good teachers.
Oh, and excellent
Excellent
teachers.
teachers.
Excellent teachers. And so that was fine. And one of my favorite teachers was Sister Anisha, who taught me the science, and that gave me the love for science. And knowing later on with Sister Anisha that science wasn't her background and so forth, but she was a splendid teacher. But she told me later, she'd watch my face, and if I looked like I got something, she knew that she was okay. And she said she always watched from my experience, my expression when she was explaining something, if it was clear enough, you know.
How
But she
did
was a splendid teacher.
How did Sister Maura come into your life then?
And Sister Maura, I didn't have an operatic voice by any means, but I was in the choir. I was in choral. So in high school, because that was Maura's first mission. So she was a young nun, you know. And then it was Maura who invited me to her final profession in January of 1945. And I entered 3 weeks later, February 2nd, 1945. When I came to Adrian, I was enthralled. And my Carmelite confreres were a little bit disappointed, but I have a lovely letter from Sister Theresa Margaret, who is one of the Carmelites, and she said, I understand. I have the letter that she wrote at the time of my reception, because I had written to them. She said, well, we're sorry that you didn't come and join us, but we know that you are happy where you are. So then...
Were you a senior now when you entered? A senior in
I was a senior in
high school?
I was there, so I entered February
Well,
of
what
my
did your
senior year.
parents say?
Well, my father had died in the meantime, so I only had my mother. In fact, my father died the summer before. But this is interesting. My dad died June of 1944. he hadn't been feeling well, and we had gone to Cleveland for a visit. We were living in Detroit. We drove to Cleveland for that, and Daddy was waiting for that vacation because he was very tired. And I can remember sitting on the porch on our Woodworth Road where we had all lived for those 10 years with my aunts and uncles. And Daddy called me Snooks, and he said,
Snooks?
Snooks. I don't know where he got that name. Anyway, so Daddy said, Snooks, I know you're thinking about going into the convent. And he said, I hope you don't think you have to go because God cured you. I hope you want to go because you want to go.
Wow, wise man.
And I said, Daddy, I want to be a nun with all my heart. He said, that's fine. And that was June, and Daddy died June 25th of that year. But I will never forget that conversation with my father.
Priceless.
Yeah, and Dad was a convert. Dad had met my mom when they worked together, and they were working in Buffalo at that time. And then when their company, I guess, moved back to Cleveland or whatever. And so Daddy was dating Mom, and he went to the parish priest, and he said, you know, I don't know much about the Catholic faith, because he was Methodist. But he said, I'd like to be in the same church that this lovely woman that I'm dating is. So prior to their marriage, Daddy converted to Catholicity.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I have the book that Father Hammer gave to my father on the letters of St. Francis de Sales that I treasure.
You are a virtual museum collector.
I have fondness for detail and circumstances that I attribute to the intervention of God. I'm a very weak person. I'm a very self-willed person and so forth. But I'm a very weak and feeble person, and I depend totally on God, and He has pampered me all my life. I feel like I'm
carried.
I'm the most spoiled child of God, and so He carries me.
And does marvelous things.
And does tremendous things because I'm too weak to do them. And that's why the little way of Therese has been an
Your
inspiration
guide.
to me all these years. So many things move together that are just so sacred. And so as you see, I look at today as a new day, and I know there'll be a surprise today.
Well, this is a surprise right now.
Yes,
Yes.
and it is.
Yeah.
And it's such a privilege to be able to relate to others via our marvelous social media that we have. You know, that is such a gift to us at this time. I'm a very tried traditionalist. I like the old, I like the sacred, I love the historical, but there's so much in the present moment and so much new that's out there.
Yes.
So I've got tremendous hope for what the future is going to bring, because it brings each new day with something brand new.
Even at the age of 90.
Even at the age of 90.
Yes.
Yes, even at the age
Therese
of
Mary,
90.
let me take you back a little bit
Yeah.
to when you entered. Were your gifts immediately recognized? Were you directed towards science or towards music?
No, I wasn't directed toward music, but I was definitely with science. That's why the new cosmology I'm totally enwrapped in at this point, because there's such. And I thought, oh, if I had only known that long time ago, you know, and I didn't. But I always loved science, and when I entered, they were looking for math and science teachers, so that was, you know, that was a steal. I got all the courses that I wanted, you know. And
What was your first mission?
My first mission was visitation in Detroit, and I was there for like about 5 years.
So is that high school?
Well, it was, but I had second grade, you know, and I think they slept through that first year because when I didn't know what else to do, I said, oh, let's put our heads down on the desk and take a little nap, you know. I thought, oh, what do I do next?
Who was your mentor?
Well, actually, my mentor was Sister Michael Patrice, who was in my crowd, so she wasn't much of a mentor. The two of us had, that was called the blind leading the blind. You know, we both had second grade. But you talk about God's providence. it was either the first year, I just had the second grade once, I think. In the first communion class we had together, and we had a huge, because we had two big classrooms. Remember, we were 50 and 60 in the classroom at that time. So there were two classes, so we probably had over 100 children, and then we had the children who were attending public school. And I can remember the other day it rang a bell. I taught them the O Sacrum Convivium for First Communion. Now, can you imagine?
Jesus.
These are little second graders, and I'm teaching this. And they sang it a cappella.
Oh, my.
And you could hear a pin drop in that church.
How beautiful.
And so you talk about the Spirit carrying me.
Indeed.
I could have never done anything like that.
Well, I remember receiving pharmaceutical pills, if you will, from medicine from you, from our pharmacy here in Adrian. When did that all begin?
Well, that all began when I was teaching at the Academy. My last teaching assignment was St. Joseph Academy, and I was there from 68 to 71. And Sister Jean Cecile is among one of my dearest friends. I just loved her. And she said to me, Therese, and this was the spring of 71. And she says, all of our high schools are closing. So I was a math and science teacher in high school. And she said, what are you going to do? She said, there aren't any. And then she said to me, would you ever like to go to pharmacy school? And I just looked at her, and she said, I was at Mass today, and I was watching Sister Bernard, who is running the pharmacy here, and she said, don't you think it would be good to have a second pharmacist at our pharmacy?
Oh, God
And
bless
so
her.
I thought, and I was teaching seniors that year, so I just looked at the career file catalog, career file that I had, and I thought, well, it sounds good, and certainly it
Up
was
your alley.
Yes, I would enjoy it. So I went to the director of education. I think that was Noreen.
McHugh.
Yeah, Noreen McHugh, and said, do you think it's feasible? I'm 45 years old. Do you think it's feasible for me to go back to school to be a pharmacist and come and help here? And she says, I think that's a splendid idea. So
The rest is history.
the rest is history.
So where did you study?
So then I studied at University of Michigan at U of M. And
lived-
Sister Bernard had completed at U of M. And she had gotten her doctorate, which is like a professional doctorate. So she was a PharmD. And she was there 10 years by herself at Maria before
God
I
bless her.
came. And so she was delighted to have some help. And but I did not, I just took the baccalaureate. I just took that and finished my internship there. I worked for 4 years in the pharmacy at U of M, which was great.
Beautiful.
And then came here, and then we worked together for a couple of years. And we worked at Bixby during weekends, and sometimes did relief work when the two of us were there.
Didn't you end your professional career in, was it Inkster?
In Dearborn.
Okay.
Yes. So then my final, I was here on campus for several years, and then I went to a little community pharmacy in Dearborn that just had I just found it last week, they just had a break-in, which was the first. I turned the news on only to find out that Cherry Hill Pharmacy had a break-in.
And you were there how long?
I was there about 16 years, and I loved it because I had a community pharmacy, which I really enjoyed. I didn't like hospital pharmacy because you never saw people, you never saw patients. You were fixing IVs or you were checking that technicians' work or whatever, but you didn't. So I liked the community pharmacy because then I had children and grandfathers and families, and many of the people were happy, and the trust element was great. As some would say, not only can I come get my medicine, but I get my spiritual direction too.
That's
so
beautiful.
they ask for, or they'd come in. Sometimes they just come in and ask for prayers.
They knew you were a
I knew that I
sister.
was a religious.
Oh my! That's where you met the
And
Iraqi.
then my boss was a beautiful, beautiful Iraqi woman. And
Was that Eva?
pardon?
What was her name?
Her
Eva.
name, well, her name was she called herself Alice, but it's really Ikhlas.
Okay.
Ikhlas, which means faith. And I loved that. I always called her Ikhlas. Everybody else called her Alice. But
Well, you made a lot of friends, which I'm not surprised, while you were there for 16 years, correct?
Yes. In fact, I called Alice or Ikhlas the other day when I saw the news there, and I had a nice visit with her. So she's going to be coming. She's been to Adrian. She was here when the Iraqi sisters were here.
I remember.
And then we had the presentation of those two young priests.
Yes.
And Alice came, and so there's a picture somewhere in our archives of Alice talking with those priests, and she came.
The
'Cause when
Iraqi priest, right?
Yes, and that was lovely, and but it was a marvelous experience. And I went to Alice's brother's wedding, and that was I felt like I was in Cana because of the Eastern traditions. And it was absolutely magnificent. So beautiful.
Joyful and dancing
Yes.
and singing.
And I went to her father's funeral. And it was the weeping and wailing that, again, is part so much of their tradition. And I remember going into this funeral home, and her mother was, like all the women were sitting on the floor, crying and weeping and wailing, and her mother was sitting on a chair, and I kind of got through them and knelt down in front of her mom just to hold her because she was crying so copiously, and it was but it was such an expression of the beauty of the Eastern faith and of the culture of the beautiful Iraqi people. And then I was at very pleasant occasions in their home for different things. So that was a wonderful experience. Those years with the Iraqi
Is there
tradition.
anyone else that you keep in contact with on a regular basis?
Well, I keep in contact. I have a lovely student from that I taught at Mount St. Mary's that I keep track of, and then I have a lovely student from the Dominican Republic. With whom I keep contact. And at the time, and we email back and forth. Now, I've not seen Jackie. I had Jackie Soto as a freshman at the academy when she was there just for the 1 year.
Oh, my.
Then she went down and she finished, I think she finished in Florida, and I think she even went to Berry for a while. But she's married and has grown children and so forth, and I keep in contact with Jackie all the time.
Well,
And
I know you were a mentor of another Jackie Richardson.
Well, Jackie Richardson.
Did you have her in school also?
Oh, yes, I had her at the academy also, but I knew her as a baby because I knew Jackie because her mother and father and her mother's sister and husband were my sister's very best friends.
No way. Oh.
Yeah, from Royal Oak. Oh. And so I've known Jackie since she was a baby.
Oh,
and then, in fact, I happened to be on campus at the time that she was interviewed for one of the positions because I think Molly Giller hired her in the secretarial part. So she's been 15 years as secretary to the council, to the general council. And Jackie's like a niece to me.
And now she's an associate.
Yes, and she's an associate.
She formalized her.
Yes, yeah. And for the last
sure
several
you were
years.
a strong influence.
Yes, and so it's wonderful, she's so whenever we have, I'm just so happy that she can be part of the congregational activities because she was such a part of the general chapter this past, this past session, and because my own family can't be here, but Jackie, in fact, Jackie dated one of my nephews for a while before. so that's a beautiful, beautiful connection.
A real
to have
connection
on campus.
Now, your life here in Regina was first in a 4-bedroom apartment, and you had such wonderful housemates.
We had beautiful housemates with Rita Gleason, who was our eldest, and Ann Wasco next, and Catherine Henry, and I was the baby of the group.
Mm-hmm. Was Catherine Henry in your crowd?
And Catherine Henry is in my crowd, and was in my crowd. And so we entered the same day, 71 years ago, on February 2nd. And we've been friends all through the years. And we went on a lot of retreats together. She and Georgianne, and sometimes Francita.
Francita.
And
the baker.
The baker. Yes, yes. Yeah, right. Because when we were first living in Regina, because of the fact we were living as a group of, there were like 8 of us, but sometimes they were like 4 and 4, but we lived all together as 8.
This
so
is
one of the dining rooms
before the renovation.
This was before the last major renovation.
Yes.
There were 8 of us in there. And so Francito named the one thing the Bakery Inn. The one little dining room was
the aroma.
Yes, yes. And so she would make this delicious zucchini bread. And
how would you describe today our dear deceased friend, Catherine Henry? How would you describe her?
Oh, Catherine Henry was just a remarkable woman. She was so devoted to her family, but she was so devoted to everyone and loved everyone, and everyone loved her. And I think, at her funeral, because of so many of the family and faith, it was just a huge tribute to a beautiful lady who influenced everything. And in fact, she was a superior at St. Gemma's for several years. And one of the girls who then came to the academy has come periodically to see both Catherine Henry and myself, from a different perspective.
Yes.
And so, and Catherine Henry had a remarkable integrity that was just so sacred and loving. And the last years were so special that I could serve her
yes,
and her health needs.
Mm-hmm. Do you still keep in excuse me? Do you still keep in contact with the Schmidts?
Yes,
her family.
And in fact, one of the Schmidts especially is her godson, and he lives in Georgia. And I hear from Ed a lot. Because Ed's, and there is a kind of a double connection, because Ed's sister was at the academy, and Marianne died of pancreatic cancer.
Oh my!
Maybe 10 years ago, I believe, and so she that was very, very close to her aunt and close to Catherine Henry and so forth. So, but I keep in touch with Ed all of the time, and he's been through a lot of serious heart surgery.
Yeah.
So we talk.
Well, you do have a ministry of communication. There's no doubt about it. And aren't you one of the privileged sisters to talk to our donors,
Yes.
our benefactors?
Yes.
What is that experience
and
like?
That's such a joy. And the other day I was talking with our former sister, Betty Baker Bell,
Okay.
and so she was talking about Carolyn Nelson. So I was able to go and tell Carolyn, and have a nice conversation, and
With
it meant so
Betty.
much to Carolyn.
They were in the same crowd.
They were in the same crowd,
Yes.
and I think Carolyn said she stood up for her at her wedding.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and when she shared that with me, I thought that. So there have been, and then another one I got Elise Garcia's brother one time, and I've gotten so many of, but the greatest one was a call I got I got this lady, and I thought that name rings a bell. what does that name ring a bell? So when I talked to the one,
This is one of our donors now.
it was
right?
one of our donors, and she was in Arizona, and I thought, who do I know in Arizona? Whatever, like this. And it turned out to be the daughter of one of our parishioners from St. Mary Magdalene, which was the parish I just left. And her mother used to take Sister Bernadette, Teresa, and me to get our spring flowers. She would drive us. And she had gone to a nursing home, and I didn't know about her. And this was her daughter, a memorial in honor of the mother, but she had a different name because she had been married twice, and I knew her by Catherine Doby instead of Catherine, whatever this, I think it was like Reinholtz or something like that. And when I talked to the lady, I said, somehow that name rings a bell, you know, and she said, well, I don't know who it would be. My mother was a parishioner at St. Mary Magdalene. I said, that's it. I said, it's Catherine Doby.
If you could speak to all the donors, if they were in this room today, what would you want to say to them?
Oh, I would want to say to them, I'm just delighted in the efforts that they make to contribute to us, and that we pray for them every single day, and we need their support to carry on our ministries or to carry on the retirement. But we are ever so grateful, and you are always the first ones we pray for every morning.
Amen.
We pray for our benefactors.
Amen.
And I said, so you get prayed for every single
day.
morning.
Yes. Oh, Therese Mary, thank you for this time. I think we might have to have another interview to touch the rest of your life, but God bless you and thank you.
You are so welcome, and God bless you.